exploring father
Because
custody
that
dynamics
was
and
what it was.
societal impacts of unwanted
People's
children in
personal
communities.
opinions, hey, your personal opinions is cool. I said, and then I also said at one time that might be a different show when we talk about the unwanted child aspect of it, because
Yeah.
that's common. Because it's kind of, if you didn't believe it in your heart, what are your eyes showing you when you look at our society today? A lot of what, even though people may not like the reference, Bill Cosby once famously said, hurt people," right?
Yep.
Do you, can we lie to ourselves to such a degree that we would say that many of the psychological trauma, psychological issues that are playing out in many communities are not the consequence of unwanted children, some sort of home-based pain? We already understand that children who are raised without fathers, and everybody on here who's dealt with or seen any of our writings, particularly what we tend to how we tend to write with our petitions, children's psychological, emotional, and economic well-being, uh, is even moving into the future, is more closely related to their relationship with their father. That's empirically proven, which would bring up to people who spoken on here to include Brett and what have you. Is, well, he didn't have the issue because he's married, but why don't the courts tend to favor the father more so than the mother? And he said, well, the incentive is different because we know less than 19% of men who have custody of their children ask for any kind of social program help. So those things I can point you to those numbers. Men typically, and we all know men, if you have your child, man, ain't calling no damn child support. Brett, if you had custody, you wouldn't be worried about that shit, would you? Give a fuck. Leave
Not a
the fuck,
bit.
the fuck alone. Don't ever call me. My buddy TJ, blessed to dead, when he got his son, this is years and years and years ago. And he got his son he ended up getting custody of his son. That son's now in the Air Force. He's probably been in the Air Force almost 10 years now. So this is how long ago we did this case. He said, when the guy asked TJ, hey man, well, what do you want us to do? He said, I want you to stay the fuck out of my life. They were offended, but he meant it. Because they immediately figured, oh, he's gonna go put them on support. Maybe, I don't know what they figured, because I can't, it had to go to state of mind. They asked the question, he made the response, and they wanted to be offended. Now, I would tend to, like I said, agree with what Brett says. There's an incentive somewhere. I like to think that the incentive isn't the motivation, but it would be difficult for me to prove that it's not. And I don't even want to go down that to say that they do this because of the incentives. I just know that the empirical data would support that the decision-making process for ensuring that before they move forward with child support, there was some sort of determination for time sharing, which the law also requires. And within that consideration for time sharing, you would see a greater weight being given to fathers. Now, what my thesis would have been before I decided to do the law school thing, uh, when I was going into when I was doing political science, and I didn't know what my master's thesis was going to be, would have been to ask the question as to what would be the difference if the fathers had a greater majority of the time sharing or something down that line. Once I determined, because I think it was going to be psychology was going to be what my master would have been in, but that's a different issue than I wanted to discuss necessarily right now. But one would just ask logically, why don't more fathers have custody? We know for one thing is not true. The notion that guys don't want their children, other than now I'm talking Ant-Man, he's an exception. But the guys that come to me are coming to me because what? They want time sharing with their kids. Tiger didn't even blink an eye. Russ didn't blink an eye. Teron didn't blink an eye. Wilson didn't blink an eye. Give me my child. Give me my child. And a host of other guys. Dwight got his kids. So why won't the courts give there? That would probably lead to what Brett said, the incentive. I think Daly may have the same mindset. Hell, Derek may have the same. What's going on, Derek B? Derek may have the same mindset that
What's
there's
up,
an
G?
incentive. I can't prove. I won't say I can't prove it. That ain't for me to prove. I don't care to prove that. But the raw numbers in what we understand about society is that, well, you would give them to the father. Now, what I would throw in there is saying that if men had this body of knowledge, say 40 years ago, Brett, when we were both still able to make kids, and be, well, 40 years ago, I wouldn't necessarily been, I've been 17, but the reality would have been is, my question would be, how many fewer people would exist if men had this body of knowledge and were willing and knew that they could go and fight, particularly almost on your own, to get the justice from the court system that you can get today? Because it would throw a lot of that shit out the window. If a woman knew that a man could fight and could win custody of the child, a lot of them probably wouldn't have had some of these children, or they may have been a lot more careful when it came to engaging in sexual activity. Now, that's my opinion. I don't have any ability to prove that because we're where we are now. But we do notice one thing is going on. There's less births going on in America, right? Within certain communities, right? Could be a
Absolutely.
lot of contributors to that. But for a fact, the death rate is exceeding the birth rate in some places. And no society can sustain in that way, just like a society can't sustain without the family. It just can't.